everybody. Welcome back to Before You Hand Over the Keys podcast. I'm Anne Marie Hayes, and today I have with me members of the Teens Learn to Drive team. You guys can introduce yourselves.
I'm Adriana. I'm here at Teens Learn to Drive. I've been here for 2 consecutive summers now. And right now I work as like the video creator with Desiree, who's amazing, as well as I help out with ad analytics when I can.
Thank you. And Adrian.
Hey guys, my name is Adrian Alexi Edwards. I recently joined the team. I've been here for about a few weeks now. I'm their actor, so whenever they need a video done, they call me up. I also help out with social media postings and just any creatives that they need to get done. They holler at me or I holler at them, and we go from there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Jessica.
Well, hello, my name is Jessica. I'm the outreach coordinator here at Teens Learn to Drive. I've also been here for 2 consecutive summers. I outreach to notable people across the GTA as well as make some content.
Wonderful. So thank you all for joining me today. And our topic today is road trips. And you've all been on road trips, and everybody knows that if they're planning a road trip, there's lots to plan. Okay, where are you going to go? Where are you going to stay? What are you going to pack? Do you have to, that kind of planning. That's not the kind of planning that we're talking about today. It's really to make sure you get where you need to be. And somebody knows you're going to be there. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and make sure you get there safely and get home safely and everybody has a really good time. So I think I'll start with Adriana again. And you had a story you were going to share about a family road trip.
Yeah, so my family does road trips very often. We try to go about once a summer to just sort of get together. And I think it was now with COVID, like I cannot tell time, but I'm pretty sure it was like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I have no sense of time anymore. It's completely gone. We decided to go to Wyoming to visit like the national park. And we're usually like a very prepared sort of family. Like we have like all the essentials like in our car, but this particular car didn't come with a spare tire. So we didn't have one on hand. And the car had run flats. So hypothetically, like if something did happen, we were supposed to be able to drive for like 100 kilometers once the tire was punctured. So what happened is we're like in Wyoming. The population is so small, like everything is spread out. It's hot, it's summer, it's somewhere you don't want to be stuck. We're driving from like the Wyoming border over to Colorado. And suddenly like the tire just went out. Like, we don't know what happened. I think we ran over something. But we were like, okay, that's not too bad. We'll just, the run flat, it should be fine. And it just completely stopped. Like we could barely make it to any noticeable station or any landmark. We were sort of stranded in the middle of the road with like no cars coming. It wasn't a busy road. So there was no one to like come and help us either. And I remember it was starting to get like dark out as well. Like the sun was starting to set. And we were like, this is not good. We're in the middle of the backwoods with no way of sort of getting out of here. So we turned off all of the like radio and noise. We rolled down the windows so we could sort of hear the car. And we sort of tried to hobble as best as we could to some sort of landmark. And I think we made it to a diner that was just about to close. And we were very fortunate and very lucky that there happened to be someone there who gave us their AAA card, and they called for a tow truck to come and help us, because otherwise we were just stuck and stranded. And eventually they the AAA came and they took us to a spot where we could get completely new tires. So we got all 4 brand new tires for the car and got them in place. But if we weren't able to make it there, or if like that person didn't help us, we would have been completely stuck that evening because everything was like about to close. So it was, I remember being just a little scary. We're like, oh, we could possibly be stuck out here in the country with nothing.
Yeah, and you're in an unfamiliar place. You don't know anybody nearby. How could that situation have been avoided?
I definitely think it all kind of starts maybe with the type of car that you had received, possibly ensuring that some sort of roadside assistance or maybe some sort of spare tire would always be attainable for you, because you really have no idea what happens. And you think that these things aren't going to happen to you until you are stuck in the middle of Wyoming and it just happened to you.
Yeah. Good points. Adrian, anything you want to throw in there?
So yeah, that's a hard one. it's almost like not about what you could do right. It's about how can you adjust to the problems that are happening in the moment. And I feel like you had a saving grace there. I can recall one time where we were driving from Buffalo to New York, and we didn't even get into a situation where our tires were punctured or anything like that. It was more or less just someone had experienced so their tires were flat and they didn't know. So they're kind of going out of control a little bit. And they weren't in front of us, but they were in front of the other car. And they just lost control. So they held up people behind them, of course, and they were able to safely maneuver to the side of the road and then of course get help. But we were going maybe 100 kilometers per hour or whatnot. So we were going pretty fast.
Pretty fast.
We slowed down fairly quickly, and we were able to move to the next lane and drive off. But that was, in terms of something very similar to your situation, it was the closest I could remember and recall from. But thankfully, you guys got the help you needed, and you're here now to do this podcast. So, yeah.
But I think that's a good point, because it's kind of what could have happened, right? If the tire had blown at high speed, you would have been in worse situation rather than just having to deal with not having a tire. A few thoughts about what you, have your tires inspected before you go. You can do it yourself. And this was a rental, was it, the car?
No, this was our car. We just had the tires replaced before the trip. So it was
so they were brand new tires.
They were brand new tires.
Wow.
It's just, I think I don't know if these tires were eventually recalled or run flats, eventually just were recalled for this particular vehicle, because when we actually got the replacement, the tires again blew out within not a lot of riding. So it was,
for anyone who doesn't know, run flat tires are tires that you're supposed to be able to continue driving on. Otherwise, if you have a flat tire, you should pull over as soon as you can safely do that and change the tire. But run flats, you're supposed to be able to safely drive on. And so you tried to do the right thing. And but another point is there that some cars don't even have spare tires anymore, or people have a spare that they never take a look at. They check the tire pressure and of the 4 tires on the vehicle, but don't check the spare.
Yeah.
Another tip there would be to take a look at the owner's manual, find out if you have a spare, find out where it is
Some of
and
them we
where
never
the
look
jack
at.
is. Yeah, well, no, that's true.
Yeah.
The least read book in the universe is the owner's manual for your vehicle. And so really important to do some preparation beforehand. Now, that was a few years ago. You had a cell phone?
We had cell phones, but because it was in Wyoming, we actually had no cell reception whatsoever. All of our phones had no reception at the spot that we were. So even though we could potentially make a call, even though we were in the United States, you can make calls out and just pay a long distance fee, we had no reception at the spot.
You were in a remote area with no tower. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so that's another issue that you had to deal with. And that's a pretty tough one. There's no kind of work around that. You hope that if anything happens, it's in a place where you can make a call. Another thing was that you had to rely on somebody else's roadside assistance. If you're going on a significant road trip, a good idea to have your own roadside assistance package. And they do cross borders, right? If you have CAA or AAA, they do cross borders. So that's a really good tip too, to make sure that if something does happen that's unexpected. And recently in Canada, we experienced a service provider, a cell service provider, who wasn't able to provide service, right?
Yeah.
And when that happened, all of the ATMs went down, Interac wasn't working, and we have, especially after COVID, become accustomed to not using cash. So people all of a sudden had to pay for gas and they didn't have any cash, right? And they couldn't get any cash. So I think another tip there, in case of an unforeseen emergency, is you should have a credit card in case you need it, but also to have some cash on hand. That if something horrible happened and you couldn't use your credit card for some reason, that you had some cash so that you could get your car repaired or buy those 4 new tires, whatever you needed.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
we had to go purchase the tires. Like it was good that we had some cash and we had like multiple cards to put it on, because otherwise we would have been unable to even get the tires that we needed once we were at the spot that we
Right.
needed to be at. Yeah.
I
And
never
those are,
carry cash too. So
well,
like it's a
no.
good, yeah,
Yeah. And you don't want to
Yeah.
have it in your wallet necessarily. I mean, you might want
exactly.
to make sure that Jessica has some cash and Adrian has some cash. And so that in the event that somebody or Jessica loses her wallet, there's still some cash on hand somewhere else, or put some somewhere in the car, that in the event that something happened, you still have some fallback cash. Because it was a very unusual situation, but very scary for a lot of people.
Right.
Jessica, you had a story too.
I did have a story. Mine,
Oh, here we go.
I guess
Yeah.
mine was a little bit more recent. Mine was actually in February of 2020. So right before COVID started. So already off to a good start with the story. My three cousins and I, we headed on a road trip to Montreal to see a hockey game. We receive a type of experience gift every year for Christmas. And we got tickets to go see the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Montreal Canadiens in Montreal. So if you are a Leafs fan, that is a very exciting game. And we were very, very excited to go see that. And we packed up the car for a road trip and we're on the highway just outside of Montreal. And again, this is February of 2020, so the weather isn't necessarily too great. It had been quite snowy. And we had, because of the snow, there was quite a bit of traffic as well, but we had noticed that there was this car behind us who was particularly close to the back of our vehicle. And again, there's traffic, we're beside a transport truck, there's not really anywhere for anybody to go. And it was once we had passed the transport truck that the car behind us had tried to swerve around. And in doing so had hit the back right tail light of our vehicle. And due to the force and the weather that had caused our car to drift, as the car was drifting, he had actually hit us one more time. I believe it was the back right passenger door where we were hit. It was right where I had personally been sitting. Of course, we know my luck is quite great. And once again, due to the force and the weather, it had directed us towards the ditch that was on the side of the highway. Luckily, my cousin had swerved at the last minute to ensure we weren't hitting this ditch head on. However, again, due to the weather, we did continue to not only roll, but then proceed to go airborne into said ditch. Luckily, we did land upright. The car behind us actually had also, due to the weather, rolled into the ditch just ever so slightly. And it wasn't until he left the vehicle that you could tell he was quite intoxicated. And we had learned later on that he was double over the legal limit of alcohol that you should be consuming before getting behind the wheel. Luckily, we had a lot of cars pull over. I would imagine if I had seen that happen, I would probably do the same. And so roadside assistance was called right away. Emergency services was called right away. But knowing he was intoxicated, it just shows that there's so many things that are so preventable.
So preventable, and so many things. The only thing that you can control is yourself and your own vehicle. You have
sure.
no control over the other cars on the road. So even if you're a fabulous driver and you do everything right, you always have to be aware of everybody else around you. You were saying that I think the car flipped.
It did flip. I believe
everybody
it
was wearing a seatbelt.
Yes. We all had sustained minor injuries such as concussions, sprains, but I know for sure if we were not wearing our seatbelts, that was the end of that. But now I'm here doing the podcast, so
yeah,
you know.
So it ended up. And did you make
the
it
little
to
things
the
in life?
There you go.
Did you make it to the Leafs game?
We did make it to the Leafs game. We did tell everybody there about the car crash, which also did work in our benefit.
See, something didn't want you to make it, but you're like, nope, God.
I told everybody, I don't care if my leg is broken. You will see me at that game. I've been waiting way too long.
Wheel me in. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Wheel me in.
But you know, I mean, a couple of other things there. You were wearing seatbelts, and sometimes, especially on long road trips, people, you know, that it's chafing your neck, it gets uncomfortable. You want to put the seat back and relax. You always have to be aware that if you did flip, and through no fault of your own, you know, it's you have to be secured in the vehicle. You cannot take that seatbelt off, and you can't throw the side belt across over your head either. You have to stay firmly in your seat. The other thing I was going to say is, you know, we pack up the car, and sometimes on a road trip like that, I mean, you've got your luggage, you've got a change of clothes, you've got all kinds of stuff, and probably 5 people in the vehicle, everybody, and your phones are there and possibly loose. Maybe purse is loose. Maybe a suitcase didn't fit in the trunk, so that's there too. In a rollover situation, everything becomes a projectile. And so you have to be aware of that too. Anything really hard and heavy should be in the back. And at 100 kilometers an hour, a cell phone in the face is, it can do a lot of damage. The other thing that makes me cringe, and I know I've told you this all before, but people on the feet up on the dashboard, long road trip, really comfy, feet on the dashboard.
Yeah.
Of course. Oh God.
That makes me cringe as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
awful.
I'm dropping you off at the roadside. It's not even a question. No, not a question.
And people say, oh, you know, it's not. No, if that airbag deploys for any reason, did the airbags deploy in your situation?
I was about to ask that.
Yes,
Okay.
all airbags.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, 200 to 300 kilometers an hour, and it will drive your feet right into your face, and it can do a lot of damage. So a lot of tips there. I mean, stay firmly in your seat, use your seat belt, sit properly. And because you don't know, you can control your car, but you can't control everybody else.
That puts life into perspective, but also your cousin practiced defense driving even when she wasn't ready for it. And that's the biggest thing, adapting to every scenario, every circumstance. And I mean, thank God you're here and she's good and everyone in the car is good, but we already know the impaired driving is just something that won't quite be solved right away, nor will it be taken serious by people that just don't really care about others. So,
and once again, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't think these things are going to happen to you, and you hear about it on the news, and you don't have any relationship to anybody that is on the news. You have no idea who they are, and you are just hearing about them for the first time. You don't think it's going to happen to you until one day it does. And unfortunately, it was before a Leafs game. We made it there, so that's all that matters. But exactly. You don't think that something like that is going to happen until, unfortunately, it does. And at that point, for some people, it is too late. If we were not wearing our seatbelts properly, if we did have spare luggage in the center console, you know, that luckily I only had a book on my lap. So, you know, the paper didn't do too much damage.
Yeah.
The Bible, right? Was it a Bible?
Paperback. Yeah.
It was a paperback, was not a hardcover. So that also helped in my situation. Will not be buying those hardcover books.
But you want, when you go on a road trip, I mean, you want everybody to have fun. The other thing that we should talk about is the jobs of the people in the car, right? So somebody is the navigator, always a good idea to have a navigator. If you're using a GPS, which a lot of people do now, don't be looking at it. That's what your navigator's for. You can't take your eyes off the road to look at the screen. I mean, I use a GPS all the time, but I'll turn the sound up so I can hear what it's telling me. Don't follow blindly, especially in places like you're talking about, Adriana, on those roads in Wyoming. I mean, they put in a new road, it's not there. I mean, you do have to still be alert and aware of what's happening around you. So that's important too. And then the other thing that, so you have a navigator in the car, and that person is the one who's responsible for making sure you get there. You have your driver who's concentrating on the road, and then maybe somebody else is in charge of music or snacks or all that other stuff. Yeah, because you want to have fun in the car, right?
And we need snacks in the car. We don't forget about the snack provider.
The snack provider. Yeah, it's a long drive, right?
Crucial. And they got to be the right snacks too. If they're not the right snacks, you're not doing your job well. You have one job.
Something to keep you going.
Right,
job.
If they're not right, we're stopping at the gas station or en route, and we're getting.
There you go. You also need a comedian in the car, someone to make you laugh. You know.
Yeah.
That's me. If you need me to come with you on a road trip, just to make
there
you laugh.
There you go.
Perfect. I'm usually the navigator. We got a whole team right here.
There you go.
If
There you
anybody
go.
would like to join, please contact the TL2D email. We can just
There you go.
www.teamslearntodrive.com.
/fun.
Yeah.
The other thing that you want to keep in mind is how long to drive, right? It's like someone was saying, oh, well, 12 hours. 12 hours is way too long. I mean, truck drivers can't drive for 12 hours. So and they're professionals. I mean, what do you think? It would be, you got a couple of drivers in the car. How often should you switch?
Yeah, that's a good question. I usually think, and I mean, I'm guilty of this, but most times when I drive my car, I don't like anyone else driving it. So I'll drive for a straight 8 hours. And
Wow.
usually I get tired towards the end. But recently I started to realize after 4 hours, that's also pushing it. You should probably switch. But I would say, thinking about it now, maybe after 2, switch your driver so they can rest and everything like that.
I think every 2, we normally do a pit stop and like stretch our legs. Then we check in and then we switch. So we either do 2 or 4 and then stop like that. That's how I remember doing it.
You know, that's a good point too, because it depends on the weather conditions. It depends on the roads. Long straight roads can be really dangerous because you tend to get kind of drowsy when there's not a lot happening around on the road, as opposed to other roads where you automatically have to be watching because of other cars, because it's hilly, because it's curvy, you know, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think we called it yellow line fever because you're staring at like this straight yellow line for so long.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I like that. Yellow line fever. Yeah.
You start losing it after like 2 hours. It's very different than like if you have like a winding road and you're like a little bit more engaged.
2 to 4. Yeah. I also think like when you are sleepy and like it hits you the first time, you got to change. And I'm stubborn. So I'll be like, it's just one though. It's just one moment. Like it'll pass. And then it keeps hitting you. Coffee might not even do it. So, especially if you're driving alone, taking a pit stop and maybe sleeping or even like staying at a place is the best thing to do. It's just that you can prevent so much. Just like you're impaired,
absolutely.
So when you're sleepy, it's just as bad, especially when your eyes are closed and you don't know what's going on. I'm sure we all know this.
When you're driving too long, you get those little micro sleeps where your eyes want to close, and that's the time to get off the road. And if you have another driver, that's a good time to switch. But if you have to drive for another hour, the best thing to do, and this comes from the National Sleep Foundation, is to pull over somewhere in a safe place that's not at the side of the highway. It means get right off the highway and have a caffeinated drink followed by a 20-minute nap. And the 20 minutes is really important because if you sleep too long, you go into the next sleep cycle. But it absolutely works. I've done it many times. And I think you said you have too, Jessica. You feel so much better. And then you're okay to drive for that extra hour. If you have to drive for another 8 hours, then you really need to get a hotel or, find another.
Hey, Anne-Marie, I will do that next time.
Once you're in that state of sleep, there's no getting out of it.
Well, the sad thing is that most young people in particular, when they hit that wall and they're that tired, they try to get home faster, which means they speed up. And then when you are that tired, no matter what you do, lack of sleep is a form of torture, right? It's you will just fall asleep. There's nothing you can do about it. So really important. And then the other point, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to quickly, I never heard about this National Sleeping Foundation. This is like new, so I love it.
Yeah, it's, people turn up the music, they try to sing for a while. Adriana, it's you got to talk to me, you got to, and Adriana's going to fall asleep too. So you can't trust somebody else to keep you awake. And you know what? An extra 20 minutes, 30 minutes added to your trip time. What is that? Nothing. And you ensure that you get there safely, right?
Yeah.
And the last thing that I wanted to bring up is, and this comes from a number of stories that I've read, and there was one in particular that hit me very hard. It was in the paper a few years ago, and it was a young family with an infant and a toddler, and they were going to Hawaii. And they had to go through the mountains. And they decided to take the more direct route, which was less traveled. And so they start off and they decided that they would dress for the plane and Hawaii, and it was middle of winter, because they'd only be in the car and then get out at the airport. So they really wouldn't need heavy winter clothes, and they didn't have a place to put them. And so they are driving, and then a sudden storm comes up and they go off the road and they're stranded. So nobody comes along. And similar to your situation, Adriana, they're in the mountains, the cell phones aren't working, and so they can't get help. And so they burn the tires, they burn everything they can to have a fire and stay warm. But eventually the husband decides he's got to go for help because it's been a couple of days and nobody has come. And ultimately, people did find her and the children. And because she was nursing the baby, she was able to keep the kids alive, but her husband died. And such a preventable tragedy. So what could they have done different? Well, they could have told people where they were going, right? And see, the problem was they were going away for a week or two. So everybody figures, oh, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Nobody's looking for them when they didn't. And the airplane, the airline doesn't call and say, hey, they didn't show up. The hotel doesn't call and say, hey, they didn't show up. It's everybody assumes that everything went the way it was supposed to. So, Jessica, what do you think? How could we avoid that from happening?
Well, that is definitely a difficult situation. And it's hard to hear because I am definitely guilty of I am going to dress for the plane and my destination, and I am not going to dress for the in-between. And especially in the winter, you're most likely going to those hot places, so you're not prepared. I would definitely think it's always a good idea to also maybe have some sort of car emergency kit. I feel like that's not something that is very common nowadays. Or if there is a car emergency kit, it's not something that is incredibly beneficial, or things need to be added to, provide some more resources for when you are in those situations of there is nobody around you and you have to resort to burning your tires in order to stay alive. There are certain things that might help bring people's attention. I know we had talked about maybe like a flare thrower, some sort of signal. I'm not sure exactly where they had been located when they got stranded, but if they were near a road and maybe weren't able to see the cars passing by or see people, maybe something of a signal would be able to bring some attention towards them.
That's a good point. And maybe even in your emergency kit, some kind of snacks or something that aren't going to go bad, but that you could just keep there in case you needed them, that kind of stuff. Adrian, what do you think? Anything else you could add there?
She did a pretty good job on what I was thinking about. But what comes to mind is maybe some extra clothing, right? To keep you warm. I was thinking water. I was thinking putting your location on, but I don't know how that works. Where do you need service for that? Is it constantly on? So that's something that came to mind. Maybe a family member would know where you are at all times.
That's a
location.
great idea. Letting
Right.
somebody know, okay, we're leaving. We should be at the airport by 2 p.m. in the afternoon. 2 p.m.
Whatever the time is, right?
And then if you're not there at 2 p.m., they start calling. And
Right.
if they don't hear back from you, they send help, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good one.
And this is the route we're taking, right? So somebody knows when to send help.
Right. So I don't know what happened to the husband, like how he died or where he went, but to Jessica's point, if you're near a road or whatnot, having like a flashlight out or whatnot could get their attention.
A flashlight actually is a really good one too, because a beam of light, right, might attract some attention. Yeah.
And doing something weird with it, like
yeah,
someone would recognize that light doesn't do that. Like, why is it doing that? And then attention gets drawn.
The only other thing I can think of are like those satellite cell phones, because I know that's something we've talked about like potentially getting as a family, just when we do these remote trips where you're not going to have cell service, or you're going into an area where it's really remote, having one of those satellite phones that you can use to call on the off chance that you're there. Like it's a preparation thing, but it's something you hope you don't need, but you're thankful that you have it once you do. or even like the
Right.
space blankets that are designed to keep you warm in the cold. They're like so small. I think you can get them at like Home
Oh
Depot.
yeah,
The running
Yeah,
blanket.
I've
you
seen
know,
those. I've seen
that's
those.
Right?
another thing to put in a kit, right? In the car, those space, they take up no room. And for
Yeah.
a situation like this, or the situation like Jessica was talking about, where their car went off the road, but other people came to help. I mean, just pull out a couple of those, and at least you can keep people comfortable while help is coming, right?
Mhm.
Do you
Yeah.
think Adriana brings up a good point? Some of these things you don't think you're going to need. No, when do I ever think I'm going to need some sort of signal or flamethrower or something to signal people?
Flamethrower.
You don't know when you're going to need these things
Yeah.
until all of a sudden you're stranded, and
Yeah.
these things are what you need. For example, even something as small as snacks. Snacks obviously that won't go bad, but you don't think that you're going to be in a situation where you may be without food for a couple of days. You always think, well, I'll be in a situation where most likely I can stop at a restaurant or an en route or at some sort of hotel where those things will be provided for me. So it's always better to be safe than sorry.
There'll
Yeah.
always be someone there to help me, unless there isn't, and so
Right.
that kind of thing, planning
Yeah.
ahead, and just taking, I mean, people say, oh, Adriana, you always plan so much, until something happens, and then it's, thank God Adriana came with us.
Facts.
Yeah,
That
but
is true.
even when you plan so much, sometimes things come up and you're like, whoa, we did, like, even when our tires went flat, we did everything right. And we were like, we didn't anticipate that. There's always something that you can't anticipate. So having all your bases covered at least gives you like a good shot at being able to do whatever you
Surviving.
can in the moment. But I think you brought up a good point, Adrian, about the location on our cell phones. Because from my understanding, it'll show your last location. So like I have it on for my
Right.
friends all the time. They have it on for me. I get lost very, very
When
easily.
you go to
So-
dates, you do that too, Adriana?
Yes, yeah. If I go to dates,
Yes.
even in
I know
Vancouver,
what y'all do. And
Yeah.
it's safe. It's very smart to do though, honestly.
I
Very
get
smart to do.
lost walking on my own street. So when I run out of data, I'll call my friends and they'll find my location and they'll tell me like go 2 streets up and 1 street left, because I'm like terrible with directions. So I don't have access to Google Maps. It's chaos. But if
Wow.
it will let you know like if like the person like is offline or where their last location was. So like if I
Yeah.
haven't been online for a couple of days, sometimes my friends will be like, where are you? Are you okay? Like I see that you're not, like I can't find you. So even just having it on and having a friend who's kind of keeping up with your trip is just always like a good idea.
A good idea, yeah. Honestly.
Yeah.
One other thing that I heard, and I have never tried, and I hope I never have to, but is that now in this situation, they were in an area already where this happened, where they didn't have cell service, but in an area where maybe your battery is going dead and you can't charge it, whatever. The suggestion was call someone who's close to you and leave the message. This is where I am. This is what happened. And please send help. Because instead of trying to continue to call them and call me back, well, they may not have the opportunity, but then at least the message is out there, and they'll know to where to go to find you.
Or even a
That's so
text
cool.
message.
Yeah, even a text. Yeah.
Because I don't know
Yeah.
how often I check my voicemail, but like I know if I saw a text, I'll be able to have a record of it, and you can ensure that it's sort of.
That's another whole thing with your generation. Well, I don't know how often I check my voicemail. I mean, it would
Yeah.
not occur to me that somebody
Guilty.
Yeah. Guilty as well.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So clearly for
Yeah.
younger people, it's texting. It's not voicemail, because they may never get it.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
could
if
die in that car.
yeah, if you send me
Yeah.
a voice, that's your death sentence. Like that's
Yeah.
I'm not checking my voicemail.
Yeah.
probably.
We're trying to dodge spammers, Anne-Marie. So
Yeah.
Oh, don't I know it? The number of times that I call people and then you get a call back 10 seconds later. I didn't know who it was.
there you go. There you go.
Well, I think we've given people a lot of things to think about. And it's the point is that beyond, whether you're going to go camping or stay in a hotel or stay with some friends and making all of those great arrangements, who's going to bring what, you also need to make arrangements Think through some of the things. What if, where is my spare? Know your car a little bit better. In Jessica's situation, it was a winter scenario. I mean, make sure you've got lots of windshield washer in the car, because I can tell you nothing is worse than being on a road with mud and sleet and you have nothing to clean that windshield.
I got a story for that. Well, not even a story.
Oh, go ahead. No, let's hear your story, Adrian.
So I didn't fill out my windshield washer fluid before I left to go back home. We're coming from a trip with my friends from Fort Erie, and it's like a hour and a half drive or so. And I was already running low, didn't fill up because I'm like, I'll be Gucci. Clearly I wasn't. And I reached a point where I was about 30 minutes away from home, and I ran out, and my windshield was just, man, it was so dirty. I couldn't see anything. And I had to pull over. Luckily, my friend had some extra windshield washer fluid that he could give to me, because if I didn't have that, I would be driving blind almost, or have to drive with my head sticking out the window, which is embarrassing. And it just shows you that
unsafe.
More or less unsafe. Yeah, it's just, you got to prep for these things. Something as small as that, you don't want to risk it. And if you didn't have a friend to help you, you would just be like, you'd be borrowing windshield fluid from other people's cars, and hopefully, like, you could that would suffice. But luckily, I had help. But yeah,
But
just
you
to reiterate,
made another really good point there, and that is that you were 30 minutes from home or 30 kilometers from home. Often that it's, that last little bit where you just want to get home, where you're not as attentive as you should be, where you're maybe driving a little too fast, where you're pushing the limits of being exhausted, you're driving without windshield washer fluid. It's that last little bit that really can make or break, and so to be aware of that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wouldn't even think of windshield wiper fluid as something to keep. Like, my mind's always on like cell phone, blankets, snacks, like alcohol, in case someone like gets a cut, like to wipe it off, not to do like
to
clarify. Alcohol.
Sure.
The spray.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Adriana.
Like the little I keep it in my bag. I feel so like, I just say alcohol and I assume people understand that it's rubbing. I'm like, oh yeah, do you need some alcohol for that cut? And they're like,
not absolute.
Yeah, glad you clarified that one, Adriana. Thank you.
Yeah.
She had to.
Yeah, but no, not no windshield wiper fluid.
Well, thank you all very much. I think we've given people a lot of things to think about. I mean, certainly we haven't covered everything, but some of the possibilities and some of the ways that you can plan ahead to make sure that your road trip is excellent in every way and everybody gets home safely. So thank you all very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.